Hey, everybody, it's Scott Bischoff coming to you for Detroit Lions podcast. This is going to be an interesting one. It's generally this. It's something that is always a good thing to do is to reflect upon the things that you could be wrong about. Yes, I understand this video could be very, very long. Yeah. So before we get into, all of this stuff, subscribe to the channel wherever it is that you're hearing this or seeing this. Also like and comment. That helps us do the things that we're doing. So this spawns from waking up a couple nights ago way too early and literally sitting. This is the sadness and just the amazingly. It's just unbelievable how the existence of this guy and how this could be a thing. But 3:30 in the morning, I wake up a couple nights ago thinking about, wow, I could be wrong on this player. And yeah, so that's kind of like what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about players that I could easily be wrong on and why. So stay where you're at. Coming to you right after the break. Okay, so I mentioned that this could be a very, very long video about things that I'm wrong on. Everybody has things that they tend to be wrong on. Let's just get a few of the important ones out of the way. Tool is the best band that's ever been. I don't know that I could be talked off of that. I don't. But, I mean, we could talk about it. I just don't know really. I'm pretty entrenched in that one. But, tend to be a thin crust pizza guy. I'm a pizza guy. You can see it. But thin crust more so than anything else. But that is absolutely a conversation we could have, hopefully over multiple kinds of pizza. That'd be kind of cool. I am convinced that my wife spends her days hiding things from me. Convinced. I don't know how. That's another one. I'm not sure I could be talked off of that, but it's a thing. Like, I can't tell you how many times I call her to ask her where something is, and it's like, yeah, look in your left hand, jackass, kind of thing. Yeah. So we're supposed to be talking about football. I'm wasting time talking about nonsense. I guess we're used to that, right? Okay. So things that I could be wrong on. A lot of this is going to be quarterback driven, but we'll get to this, and I'm going to try to make this as short as possible while also just wasting 3 minutes of your life talking about what I just talked about. Okay, quarterbacks. I think at this point Bryce Young is the first pick, and I feel pretty comfortable there. Generally speaking, if I'm wrong, a lot of people are wrong. Now, I think that should be kind of locked up at this point. We're less than 7 days from the draft. So, but then it's haywire. And it's like, okay, we'll talk about the teams in a second, but like the stuff with Will Levis, I think there's any range of possibilities for him to go potentially at 2, which is, so this is kind of where I'm at with this is like, how can I be wrong on Levis? I don't think Levis belongs in that range, but I could easily see the Texans pulling a smoke screen and picking Levis at 2, and he was our guy all along and all this stuff. I just, it's one of those things where I just don't value him and his game as much as I value the others in the other 2 in this class. I understand the Stroud stuff. It just seems like there's a lot of negative stuff about Stroud right now. But again, when draft day comes, if Bryce Young goes 1, and the Texans are on the board. My brain is and what's informing the way I think about this is that CJ Stroud's not going to Houston simply because of the, some of the off the field. It's not off the field stuff. It's just his agent is David Mulugheta. I don't think the Texans would want to put their toes back in that pool again. You're hearing all this of the S2 cognition test and all this stuff. Some of those stuff that you're hearing about Stroud makes it sound like he's going to tumble a little bit, but and that's kind of what I've thought all along is I think if he doesn't go at 1, he could have a little bit of a fall, but I could easily be wrong on that. Anthony Richardson is a player I have appreciated his game, grown to love his game too much, and it would very much surprise me if he falls, say, out of the top 10 range. But again, this is why we're talking about this, because, it's one of those things where I would think that he should be in contention to be pick 1. And that he maybe shouldn't fall past, say, pick 3 for a team to come up for him just because of his upside as a player. But do I know that for sure that teams feel? No, I don't know that for sure. And then that gets into the conversation about, what happens at 2 guides what happens at 3. And maybe, we're starting to hear a little bit of it's Bryce Young at 1, then a lot of questions about other players. Is there a trade up market for some of these quarterbacks to come to 2 or 3 or, what's Indy going to do at 4? I don't know. So we need to talk about bias and understanding it and having it and trying to remove it from the process of what you're looking at so that doesn't cloud and color your judgment on everything else that you see. So, for example, if the first thing you see from Anthony Richardson is a video of him, avoiding pressure, climbing the pocket, and dropping a dime into coverage, and you're not super particular about the way you look at things, not even saying, it is what it is, that can cloud your decision-making as far as the rest of what you see. If the first thing you see is him busting off a 65-yard dime against LSU or the long run against Tennessee, you have to then, compose yourself for what the rest of what you see and make sure that when you're seeing stuff that's maybe negative or where there's some issues that you see that just as clearly as you see the positives. So bias and understanding, all that stuff happens, at every position. It's just important to recognize it. So I think with Richardson, it's you see the pop plays and the splash plays, and you think that happens all the time, and it happens with all these quarterbacks. But it's like, we just have to recognize it. So the quarterback position is going to be one of those things where, on draft night, it's going to be really interesting to see how the teams in say the top 10 range handle the quarterbacks. And the quarterbacks are tied with the offensive line. So it's so for a while now, I have thought that there would be 3 offensive linemen going in the top 9, possibly 10. And I think that's Peter Skoronski, who you could make an argument should go in the top 5. Paris Johnson Jr. and Darnell Wright. Those are the guys I think that are in that top 10 range. Skoronski to me makes sense just because he is a safe player with a known. I think that this is a guy who can play as a tackle for you, also play at a high level as a guard for you. And in this class, there's not a. It's an interesting class, but there's not a ton of knowns. Like, is Paris Johnson Jr. a left tackle only, who may not be able to play inside? Yeah, that's a possibility. Is Darnell Wright I slipped there. We're going to get to him. Is Darnell Wright a right tackle who could play right guard at a very high level? Is that? I mean, that's the way I view it. But so that kind of colors the thought process as far as how these guys go. But everything you hear is Skoronski is a pretty coveted guy going top 5. But it's one of those things where he does have short arms, and are you really selecting a player who's likely to be a guard in the top 5? I mean, I think you are if you make a safe pick. And then you could make the argument that some of the teams in the range of, say, 5, 6, and then going on down the line need maybe more interior or long-term help at tackle, where a player like Skoronski could fit there, play early, play to a high level. It's an interesting thing. But they are tied together. So if you have 3 quarterbacks in the top 9 and you have, say, if you have 3 offensive linemen in the top 9 and 4 quarterbacks, it almost doesn't make sense what you're saying, right? Like, so that means that a couple defensive linemen, edge players, might be the other 2. So something's got to give, right? So we're just trying to recognize some of the flaws in the thinking about how both those things can't really happen. So is it all the linemen getting jammed up into the top 10 because of the relative nature of this draft and how it's safer to draft offensive linemen? Maybe. But if that happens, it's almost likely that the quarterbacks are falling a touch. So that's kind of where that is. Jackson Smith-Njigba. To me, he's a player that teams should start thinking about around pick 12. But is he really going to go that early? This could be one where I have thought about him. I've overthought him and his skill set too much. I know he should be the first receiver in this class, but this is not a great receiver class. So, and then you look back at, like, where would he have gone in last year's draft? There's an argument to be made that you could easily be wrong about him going that early in a draft. Real quick, let's talk about. This is just my thoughts about pass rushers. You can never have enough. You should always gamble on athletes, always. Period. I mean, it's kind of like that at almost every position. But with pass rusher, there's a premium on athleticism and also interior offensive line. When you look at the interior offensive line, the guys who perform the best in their short shuttle, in the agilities, tend to work out. So you should be gambling on athleticism in both those positions. Get that out of the way. Darnell Washington, I have viewed as, in my mind, tight end 1 the entire process, just because of the unicorn stuff, right? But and I think he should be a first round pick. But I could easily see me being completely wrong on that, and teams viewing him as limited in a lot of ways, as far as like route running and that kind of stuff, and maybe overthinking how much he helps as a blocker, even though, as I say that, I almost want to slap myself for saying what I just said, because I really do think he should be a first round pick. This is the kind of stuff that wakes you up in the middle of the night. Jalen Carter is an interesting, I don't know what to do there. I mean, I see the stuff on film and all those things. I see how he destructs blocks, and I mean, he just blows stuff up. But like you're hearing his agent talk about how he's not going to fall out of the top 10. Is pick 10 his floor? I think pairing him with Jordan Davis would be really interesting if you're Philly. Is Philly going to come up to secure him? All these things, is that even a real thing? I don't know. I mean, I could make an argument that on the field, you should gamble on what he is as a player, but the off the field stuff is so. We all know about it. So where is that at this point? Now we're going to get to the 2 players I think that are most interesting in this thought process, and the first is Will Anderson, and I know it's. I put out a video of him and Darnell Wright. Maybe, I don't know when it was, whatever it was. And Wright kind of swallows him whole in that matchup. And so I don't care for Anderson's game as much as others do. And I worry about it. Something I fret over. Because a lot of people talk him up like he is a guaranteed rock star pass rusher at the NFL level, and I just don't see it. I'm willing. I understand that I could easily be wrong on that one. I've given you some evidence with the Darnell Wright matchup, and I do think that this is where bias comes in. When I saw him last year, I think he was more athletic. I think he had more first step quickness. I think he was probably lighter, significantly lighter, maybe in the low 230s range last year. So I saw some explosion and some all that stuff that made you think this guy's ridiculous. And I didn't see it this year. But understanding that my bias was expecting to see what I saw last year from him and that I didn't see it this year, so it left me disappointed. So take that for whatever it's worth. Tyree Wilson. I think, and I've talked about him being a player who could go as high as pick 2. He has a foot injury. He really hasn't worked out in the process. But when you watch him on film, he's got all the stuff that you would want. He's huge, long arms, big wingspan. He plays with power. He has bend. He can do all those things. But is he really a player who could go as high as pick 2? Stuff that's floating in my brain. I don't know. I think he should. Again, and we're just talking. So it's like, we're just having a conversation about the things where you might be wrong about some of this stuff. Lucas Van Ness is not a player I fully understand. I see the power. I see all of that stuff. He didn't start a game at Iowa. I don't know how he is projected to be a top 10 pick, but this is also a guy who loves Ziggy Ansah coming out of BYU. So take that for whatever it's worth. Yeah. Christian Gonzalez, I have talked about him being a very passive player. I don't understand the absolute love for what his game is, unless you're telling me he's going to a zone team where they can use all that athleticism and let him just come forward and break on things that he sees. And then, yeah, I'd buy it. But to me, he's a guy that you got to get more competitive. And, how do you do that? Could I be wrong there? And could he be a very, very early pick? Absolutely. It's possible. The other one is Devin Witherspoon. I've talked openly about thinking that he's limited in some ways athletically, and I wanted to see the shuttles with him, but we didn't get them. Could I be wrong about that? Yes. It's easy to be wrong about those things. It's important to recognize the possibilities of being wrong about those things. So that's just kind of like where, in some ways, some of these players that I could see after, like post draft, like, yeah, I should have been able to see through that kind of, and it takes a while. Like even players that you may have had an opinion on last year, it's still too early to really know whether you're right or wrong and whether that even matters. Players go to teams, and then whether they work, you almost have to detach yourself at that point, because a lot of whether they work or whether they don't work has to do with where they go, what kind of coaching they get, how much do they work, how much do they want to be, better football players than they are going into the NFL. What's the transition for them like? So there's a lot of out of your control. It sounds like I'm absolving anybody who might have a draft opinion and be able to then explain it away by just saying, oh, it went to a bad place, whatever. I mean, it does happen. So it's a thing. This is generally not something that we know about for quite a while on these things. But just some thoughts early on a Saturday morning. We're less than a week out from the draft. Just kind of wanting to be upfront and explain, some of the players where you could see yourself not necessarily being 100% spot on, but that's okay. It's an opinion business. The last thing I'll say about it is it doesn't have to be so serious either. It just doesn't. I mean, it doesn't need. We're talking about opinions on things. There's no absolutes. All the stuff that we talk about has to play itself out in the future, and we have no control over any of it. So that's just kind of where it's at. It's just it was. I laughed at myself but waking up the other night thinking about all these things, and I just wanted to talk about the players and this kind of stuff. So you guys have a great weekend. We'll chat soon.